All right, so I'm going for second dwellings on properties, Charlie.
Expand on that a little bit further. I know we've spoken before, but let's get into this.
I got you. So right now, there are a lot of people who have properties, and in a couple of scenarios, one, their builder has just gone bankrupt and they have nowhere to live, which means that they are currently renting elsewhere.
That is such a small number, but continue.
Cool. Don't worry, I'm going to add to it. There are also a group of people who are staying at home with their families because they cannot afford to move out. They're being compressed on the cost of rent. They are also being compressed on the ability to purchase properties, which means they're staying with their families.
So this is the millennials who are still living with mum and dad.
Completely. There are also a whole heap of people that are coming into the country that are trying to increase the density, shall we say, of people that live on a certain property, right? So if there's a group of people coming in from overseas, maybe a family and the extended family, and they're like, well, how can we maximize living on this one space? And they've got these similar problems, Charlie, which is how do we just get more people into this space? Or some other people that might have increase in expenses with interest rates going up and all these kind of things, saying, well, how can I get a little bit of cash from the property that I've got now to help me offset a little bit of what my expenses have increased on?
Can I throw one more in?
You totally can.
I would say there's a huge conglomerate of boomers who have parents they're looking after still that are getting quite elderly and probably moving in with them. I've seen a few of that in my own network in recent times.
I also have some additional on top of that, which is like I got people who've got a lot of land, like farmers and stuff, saying like, can I potentially put Airbnb out here? And so I'm sitting there going, there are these demands that lead to the same solution, which is small dwellings on these properties.
Can I set some context on that? We're making the suggestion here that let's say someone lives on a 1,000 square meter block, they've got a house on it and there's a really big backyard and there's room for something like a granny flat or a tiny home or something like that, or the farmer's probably got a different setup. But the idea there's room on a block of land that someone already owns to add a second dwelling.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where I'm going for. And the benefit of this is from a construction perspective is if this gentleman's gone from being a carpenter to actually being a licensed builder, you can do the full install. So you can build the thing, go on the block of land, connect it all, sign it off, and then you can rent it out or you can do whatever. Like this becomes an actual building that's on it, on the land.
So in your scenario here, just to clarify, is someone coming out and building this like they would build a house, or is this something where it's because you kind of hinted on the idea of you might be delivering this here?
This is exactly where it rolls. All right. So I was thinking about looking at the current builders and going, okay, what are the scenarios that they have gone through? Not too dissimilar to yourself that I want to try and avoid. So you've walked through the 90-day cash cycle that is very difficult. Another layer that I'm putting on top is like labor is very expensive in capital cities, right? So if you're trying to build something in Melbourne or Sydney, the individual to do the work is actually more expensive than out rural, etc. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's one thing as well. But then also we've had supply chain challenges in the past, and I'm like, okay, well, how do you overcome them? And so you have these great innovations around prefabrication. So you purchase prefab things. And so my thought is you go and get a block of land outside of the metro areas or in rural areas, and you essentially prefab these dwellings, right? So call them tiny houses.
I reference a few things here. First off, I actually really like your niche. I didn't actually recognize how much demand for second dwellings there is likely to be in future. And when you lay out all those scenarios, I'll put it this way, over the next 10 years, I see substantially more of this going on, particularly in metro. Right, metro areas or major regions than didn't. So actually for a non-trade, I'll give you a little, I've got a hat on, I'll do a hat tip.
A little hat tip, yes.
And I will say it's interesting in every one of these things, we look for the future demand. That might be a big hint for the listeners, stand in front of where it's all going.
Well, that's what I'm looking for is that the trends on it as well.
Now, the second thing I wanted to ask, did you get this idea from like shadow kitchens on Uber Eats?
No, but
because it's kind of similar, is it not?
Or shadow kitchens, though. Yeah, totally. And so essentially what I become is prefab, putting it all together off-site, and then going, installing it, and then the builder's license is the signing it off, right? And because of all of these demands that I've been referring to, it's actually a growing industry. I did something very similar to you, Charlie. So I mildly cheated. So I actually spoke to someone who kind of creates these at a very small scale. And the paid ads.
Wait, did you accuse me of playing on an unfair advantage
like
and then
that?
you've cheated?
You like
All right,
that?
cool. Just so I know how we're doing this.
Hey, man, I'll do anything to win. Kick your ass. So I spoke to the dude. The cost per lead that he's getting is ridiculous, and he's located in Queensland. It's like $10 a lead, like it's nothing. And he's just like, the demand is ridiculous. He's like, he just doesn't want a big company like that. And so I'm looking at this as a huge trend. And my question to him, over the last couple of years, have you seen this grow? He's like, yeah, I just can't service everybody. He's like, it's great because I just get to select the people I've got. So similar, the marketing on this is you're actually riding the wave versus swimming against a rip. Like this is, everyone will come to you because they've got problems they need to solve.
I dig it. I dig it a lot. All right. You've won me on niche. Can I ask a question on this though? Because this is one of the things where I look at it and go, in the idea that you're going to set up, it's essentially going to be a prefab factory, right? You're going to have likely a factory or something similar to do this. There's a huge amount of capital required to get something like that off the ground. Is this something where you're going to try and rent a factory to start with or start with something small? Because in the nature of what you're talking about, I see some potential cash constraints on this to make it work.
I did research on that too. So turns out you can actually build these things outside. So I know 2 people that actually
it's actually really interesting.
Rented a yard and do this thing. The yard is outside, and I've actually been there. And they build the things on the yard. There's no roof, no walls, nothing. And so they rent.
You would essentially need like you could even get like a portable toilet, maybe run some power from somewhere. It's not as unreasonable as I initially thought.
It's totally. And so, man, they just have generators coming in. And so, but then when they build the things, they put
that'd be super expensive.
Yeah. So, but then when they build the thing, they put solar panels on the roof. So when they're doing the fit out on the inside, they've already got power in them. And so I'm like,
that's actually amazing. Dude, so he's amazing.
He's doing sales calls for every new place he's putting together. It's like
in one of the ones he's built. That's awesome.
Literally, he's like, "Do you want to see the house? Like, this is what it looks like."
That's actually really clever. I don't want to skip over that. So number one is he's getting free power on the idea of putting solar on these homes as he builds them. Tick. And then 2, if he does a sales call, which I'm going to say is over Zoom or I suppose you can do video call on everything these days.
Yeah, FaceTime, etc.
But he's showing them the product in the sales call.
yeah. He's like, "This, I'm at the yard now." Like this, it's so good. And dude, the yard's tiny. Like, and I say this from like if you're getting started, and I know exactly how much one of my mates pays for this yard. It's $800 a month. Like it's not crazily expensive.
It's not crazy to think you couldn't go to an agricultural area or a factory area and find a cheap land availability
I'll tell you,
somewhere.
I got one more for you. This is actually the back of someone else's yard. They've got this massive construction, like this huge like factory, and they just portioned the back, and they just said anyone who wants to like store things. So they've got like one of the other ones is a caravan storage is like right next to it. And so they just had this empty spot. But I'm like, you can totally bootstrap this. Right? Like if you went and rented something like this and you had a team or you had yourself, even if you want to get started, rent something like this, call it $1,000. It just depends what your location and the size that you go for, and then start selling some things, put it together, and like you can use your first deposits, which leads me into the main point that I like about this is the cash flow cycle is because this is focused on the second dwelling, most people have existing equity on the current dwelling, which means I get to price these things, which would be, I don't know, 100 grand, 150 grand, whatever it may not be.
I actually know some rough pricing. I think the average one in Australia is between 100 and 200 grand for a granny flat. Because I'd done a bit of research on this because I planned on putting a granny flat on one of my properties. So
look at that. And and so you go, great, take 50% up front, 50% upon completion. It's on them to go and get the cash, right? So my hypothesis is that some people will just refinance, grab some cash out of their current property, which is where they want to put the thing, and then transfer to me the cash for it.
Right, but that would make the assumption your margin's over 50%.
Correct, on the construction of it, which means I'd have to price it in.
Right, so this is where I see a potential flaw, and I suspect you've thought about this. But let's say it's use round numbers. It's 100 grand for a granny flat. I can't see the margin being over 50% on that when you look at labor and materials and everything that goes into it, like maybe 30.
Yeah, you're not going to be hitting your 80% margins on this. I couldn't find an industry like that. Dude, I looked at bomb shelters and stuff like
So you've still got a cash flow negative cycle here.
Totally.
So how are you circumventing that?
Oh,
Like how fast can you build these things is really the question that comes into it.
and that is a question for a technician. Like I know my mate can turn his around within 5 weeks, as long as he's got the prefab. So it's not like it's a huge thing, but again, you've still got the cycle of the upfront payment and then the payment upon completion, right? So there's still that cycle that sits between it. But the key layer to this is if you were to actually utilize them for your own investments. So imagine you're a builder with a license, Charlie, and you go and invest in a block of land, go and throw a second dwelling or like a smaller house, which is your second dwelling business on that block of land, and actually accumulate your investments via that mechanism. Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into creating wealth inside and outside your business, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.